Hi guys, it's me. I just wanted to talk today about the idea of Christianity as a vision of reality. You see, one way that we tend to think about Christianity in the 21st century world is as an event that may or may not have happened in the world, and that is now a major religion of the world with which you can choose to participate or not participate, and that this ultimately, I mean, whether or not it's true, in a sense, what's more true is that Christianity exists in the larger context of essentially a spatio-temporal box that we all believe we are living in, and that contains our vision of reality and contains what we perceive as the causal order. And that if Christianity is true, it happened within this box first and foremost. But what I want to argue today, or at least speculate about, is the idea of Christianity as in fact something far deeper about what it is and what it says about how reality is actually structured. You see, what I want to say is that Christianity isn't just a religion in the world, that if the case, Christianity is, in a sense, some sense, the world itself. That in fact, actually, what's ontologically the case is that the whole thing was generated, set in place, and created by the experience of Jesus Christ. That somehow he was the code. I mean, he was the program that had to be laid down, from which the rest of the program could spring up, much like a garden. And he was the seed, if you want a more earthy metaphor. But the point is, it's important to think that from an ontological point of view, this might actually be more the case than anything to do with a spatio-temporal box. You know, the realism that the spatio-temporal box tries to preserve is really a kind of naive realism. It's the realism, and you can go back to, I think, a lot of even traditional, metaphysics gets this wrong a little bit, in the sense that they believe that naive realism is actually, the case. You read Aquinas, you read Aristotle, and the implication can be sometimes that, there is an objective outside world organized in space, and that our intellects have direct perceptual experience of this and correctly detect it. I don't think this can actually be maintained anymore. Not only are there problems just in terms of the relationship between the subjective and objective experience as a conceptual problem, but just science itself and its vision of what the spatial-temporal world is and what it's made of has just exploded. I mean, it's just not that vision anymore. It's a vision of quantum superpositions. It's a vision of digital physics. It's a vision of essentially a hologram being projected from the two-dimensional boundary space at the edge of time. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, I'll do a whole video on the holographic principle because it's a key idea. But forget all that. I mean, so what is it really? I mean, what level of understanding should be applied to the world as a whole? And I think if you start to approach Christianity, and it's the only really way to approach Christianity in the modern world today, I think if you start to approach it truly as a theological science fiction kind of story. I mean, it's really very kind of Philip K. Dick. It's saying that it's a kind of game, and the game is both outside you and also participation inside you, because inside the original player, the whole setup of the game was allowed to be determined. Jesus made the game, but he also allowed the game to happen. And again, I've said this before, his determination gave us our freedom. I mean, the world is much more like us playing around in the mind of Jesus than it is a spatio-temporal box. And that's a very weird way to think about it in terms of the way we usually think about these things. But from God's point of view, it would make perfect sense, especially if Jesus was God. It actually might make us be able to understand that idea somehow, that somehow the whole world is nothing but things happening in the mind of Jesus. And this is why everything is his bread, and the world is his bread, and all these metaphors are basically just trying to say to you that what you think is stable elements and objects and everything else are all in some deeper metaphysical sense actually just the brain of Jesus Christ. I mean, on some level. The world is weird, and outcomes, as long as we keep thinking that they're determined by a spatio-temporal box, they will seem to be determined by a spatio-temporal box. But outcomes can be determined by lots of different things and lots of different causal mechanisms at different levels of understanding and different levels of ontological reality. It's very difficult for us to want to think like this at all, because essentially the modern world is just trying to hold itself together because it doesn't have a strong metaphysical point of view about reality, other than the box. And so it's just holding itself together with the box. The box must be maintained, because once that goes, and once what's revealed is a universe of conscious flux that can be more ultra than was once presumed, the whole thing of what to believe just goes into haywire. But the point is, the game has been set for us. The story has been told, and the way to play the game is not hidden from us. It's that you actually, by participating in with the one player who is able to actually beat the game, you can then, through your own being, somehow find your own happy ending. But only because the initial player was perfect. I mean, he played the game perfectly. And we all play the game otherwise imperfectly. And this is not about convincing other people that this is what's happening. I mean, if the more you have to convince other people, who knows, the more it may not come true for you. It's about convincing yourself, you see, that this is in fact the case. That this is what reality really is. And what you thought was the box was scenery, in a sense. I mean, it's not that these things aren't real, but that doesn't mean anything, really. Because what's real is your experience. What's really real, you know, as opposed to what's merely real. But it does demand the breakdown of the belief structures which are controlling your behavior in order to make it still, quote-unquote, participate with the metaphysical universe that you acquired naively when you were a child. And now that you're wiser and older, you should be unafraid to look at reality again and see what didn't I know then, and what's really going on. And the fact that we have the ability to start to think in these conceptual terms implies the fact that it is like this, that it's something like this. And in fact, with Christianity and its radical ability to self-validate, which I can't prove to you, but you can just know once you get there. That you can really change who you are, because what the world is not the same. So that you have to change yourself, because the world isn't the same anymore. It is not a spatio-temporal box. The box is a part of the story. It's a box only insofar as World of Warcraft actually represents an entire, you know, causal planet or whatever. I mean, it's not really real. What's real is the story, and your participation in it as existence itself. You know, obviously this is a big topic, and I'll be talking more about it because there's much to say. But just to get started, just again, the world as Christianity, specifically as Christ itself, is the world. And that anything else is just a story, holographic hallucination that we just project onto the forms in order to try to make sense of it in a way that keeps our minds safe from the truth of the immediacy of God and the immediacy of Christ. God bless.